Okay, welcome back to another episode of Sippy Cup Shenanigans. I'm Taylor Palmer.
And I'm Katherine Jensen, and today we are joined by our first guest, Mackelle Hendrix. So,
Yay.
yay, thank you for being here. We are so excited. This is like a big deal.
Super
Our
fun.
first guest, and we're so grateful to have you on. Thank you so much. And we are going to get to know Mackelle a little bit and hear about her journey with adoption and motherhood. And so we're super excited. So, Mackelle, if you could introduce yourself a little bit, like background, where you're from, family, what you're doing right now, and everything you want us to know.
Okay. So yes, I'm Mackelle Hendrix, and I know Catherine from high school. I just met Taylor, but I knew of Taylor just from Catherine talking about her. So I grew up in Oakley, moved to Midway in high school, went to high school there, and then I went to Utah State for college, and then I never left Logan. So we're just hanging out in Logan here for the last 10-ish years, 11 years. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So I am married. I met Darren. He's my husband. I'll probably use his name throughout this. So if I say Darren, that's who I'm talking about. But I met him right after school and we dated for about a year, got married, and now we have a cute little boy that we adopted just about a year ago. So
Wow,
that's
congratulations.
yeah. I know the time has flown by so fast. That first month went kind of slow when I was getting into the hang of it, but
Yeah.
I feel like every other month after that, it's just flown by. So
And it gets faster and faster.
yeah, I know that's really. I feel like I've been doing the milestone pictures every
Yeah.
month, and every single time I take one, I'm like, I feel like I just barely did the last one
Yeah.
like last week.
Like yesterday.
So,
Yeah.
yep. So that's crazy. But yeah, we're living in technically Wellsville. Darren is he runs his own little business. He's a financial advisor, and I work for an engineering firm doing CAD design. So I do that part time and then hang out with Riggs the other time, and I get to work from home a little bit. So nice and flexible. I love that.
Awesome.
And then, yeah, we're going to be talking about the adoption story and how that all came about. So, some little things to adoption that I want to throw in there. There's adoption positive language.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, we
lot
asked
of
Mackelle to explain a little bit more so we can learn more about
For us,
this.
and then also for anybody listening, I think
Yeah.
it's helpful information.
Yeah, and I feel like adoption isn't talked about a ton. So a lot of what people know of adoption is what they see in movies and TV. That's kind of what my experience was. And I knew a few people here and there that were adopted. I know a couple people who placed babies for adoption, but I didn't really talk about it that in depth with them. So, common terms that are used that are not preferred would be like real parents, birth, yeah, like who's your real mom or who's your real dad? Do you know your real family? Instead, we use birth family or some family. It kind of varies depending on the family, but some people will have a relationship with birth mom, so they'll call her birth mom or tummy mommy or Mama Jill or Mama Catherine, that type of stuff. But all of the people involved are real parents. So adoptive mom, birth mom, both are real moms.
I love that.
That's great.
Yeah. And another one, rather than given up for adoption, it's placed for adoption. Babies aren't given up. It's actually an act of love. They're loved, and it's a very intentional decision to choose a family when these birth moms are looking at families and choosing who they want their babies to be raised by. So there's that. And then adoption plan. I'm creating an adoption plan that's like from a birth mother's perspective. I'm choosing to place my child. I'm going to create an adoption plan with this couple.
Mm.
So those are the main ones that I feel like pop up a lot, is just the given up or using the real term. So
Thank you so much
that's
for
super good to know.
sharing. That's so
yeah.
helpful, because even those things I wouldn't
Mhm.
have necessarily thought about. And
Mhm.
so, and it's like kind of simple shifts that we
Mhm.
can make in our language. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
So how did you and your husband Darren decide that adoption was the right path for you? What led you to that decision?
Okay. So
And that might be a loaded question.
Yeah.
no, no, you're good. I'm just trying to decide. Do you want me to give you the long story, like the longest version, or how
It's
long do we have?
completely your choice.
Yes, it is whatever you want to do.
Okay. So Darren and I got married in 2018, so about 7 years ago. And we got married, and I was like, I just want to have just the two of us. So let's talk about kids in 3 years, and we'll just kind of hang out, get used to being married, have our time. So we did that. 3 years came along, and I was like, I don't know if I feel quite ready for kids yet. And he was kind of feeling the same way, where like, yeah, we could try, or we could wait and see. So I was like, well, let's talk about it in a year or so. So another year goes by. We're 4 years in, and I'm feeling a lot more warmed up to the idea at this point. So we kind of start talking about it, and we're like, still not quite there, but we're close. So let's talk about it in like maybe another year or so. So we're like 5 years in at this point, which in Utah, not super typical. Usually
Yeah.
honeymoon babies are common.
Yes.
So we get 5 years in, and I'm like, okay, I I feel good about this, and he felt good about it. So we kind of start planning, like, our how do we want to do this? Like, when do we want to start trying? And it always just felt a little like I was ready for kids, but it didn't quite feel right to try to get pregnant yet. So we get to July in 20, it would have been 2022. July 2022, we're talking about growing our family, and adoption kind of popped into my head, and I'd never really thought about it before. And like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what if we adopted? And Darren was like, oh, yeah, that kind of sounds nice. So we talked about it, and we were like, let's start doing some research. So I get on Google, and for anyone that's ever adopted, Google is kind of intimidating when it comes to adoption.
Oh, I'm
and you
sure.
don't know where to start. So you're just like, how do you adopt? That's what I typed in. And you get so many things, and there's so many steps. And on top of all of the steps, it's like you see the financial numbers too.
Mm.
And that's really intimidating. So I'm going through this. I'm looking at like Instagram pages for people who have adopted to see how they started. I'm looking at different resources in Utah. And it just got really overwhelming. And I was like, maybe we shouldn't do this. This is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot. Maybe we should just try to get pregnant.
So
and then,
much information, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
To
was
try
like,
to process.
exactly. It was just like, how, I don't even know where to start.
Where to
And
start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if we can get pregnant, maybe we should just do that. So we kind of put that on the back burner, but it kind of kept coming back up. And I feel like it probably took me a few weeks to just process, and I would get back online and kind of look through and kind of start looking at different agencies, even though we had decided not to go that route. And about a month later, it just kept coming up. So I asked Darren about it. I was like, hey, so what do you think about reconsidering the adoption portion, and he was like, yeah, I'm good to do whatever. And Darren's kind of a yes man, so I'll throw like anything at him, and he's like, yeah, that's a great idea. So I'm like, no, like really,
You're like, you have to tell me honestly.
Yes, like.
And he's like, no, I actually feel really good about it and really quite calm about it. So let's just do more research and kind of start moving towards that direction. And then if it ever feels not quite right, we'll just pause and go the other direction. So we did that, and I happened to know someone who had adopted a few years back. I wasn't super close to them, but they actually worked in the same company that Darren works for. So we decided to reach out to him and just ask him about his experience. He had adopted in another state, and then he was currently going through the adoption process for a second time here in Utah. So we got on the phone with him, and he told us about his experience and kind of told us about the agency he was using, and the conversation just went really well. And I'm sure you guys both know sometimes there's not really words as to why something makes sense. You just kind of feel a little bit pulled, and something kind of touches your heart just a little bit extra.
Yeah,
so
just feels right.
Yeah. And I couldn't explain why, but we got off that phone call, and I was like, that felt good, and I want to keep going. And Darren felt the same way. So then we found out about another person who Darren worked with that used the same agency as that first guy. And so Darren talked to him and asked him about his experience, and he was like, yeah, just look into different agencies, but we had a really positive experience with this agency. So after that, we researched it, like 3 different agencies online, and then called the one that the 2 guys had worked with, and they're called Forever Bound Adoption Agency. So they're here local in Utah, and they set up a Zoom call with us, and we met with the guy that runs that agency. And it was a very interesting phone call. I expected it to be all like roses and rainbows, and he was going to be like, oh, this is so sweet. I'm so happy for you guys.
Yeah.
And he did a great job, but that's kind of where my perspective of adoption shifted. It's not necessarily all perfect and like this super heartwarming, like it is very heartwarming. It's very special, but it's just different than how it's portrayed a lot of times. So he talked to us about how it's just kind of like trying to find a needle in a haystack is what he used, which I'm probably going to get emotional. Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay.
That part really scared me because I was like, wow, this is a lot of emotional energy. It's a lot of time and effort to put into something where we're trying to find a needle in a haystack. Like that's not super encouraging. It didn't feel super great. And he didn't mean it in a bad way, and I didn't take it in a bad way, but it was just kind of the reality of what adoption can be for a lot of people and what it kind of daunting
is.
Yeah, where you just don't know. And so he talked about that, and then he said, I really think you should look into a few other agencies. I have a lot of couples, and I have a wait list. So if you go with us, you're going to have to get on a wait list. So we got off that call, and I was like, gosh, I am kind of discouraged right now because I felt really good about that agency. I'd heard a lot of good things about it, and so I was kind of disappointed, but we talked about it and we're like, well, we'll look into a few others, and if we still feel pulled to that one, then we'll go that route. So we looked into a few more, and Darren this time was like, that's the agency we need to go with. We have to go with Forever Bound. I feel very confident that, sorry.
It's okay.
And you'll hear this from a lot of people. You just kind of know there's a baby. Like you feel connected that there's a baby out there you don't know where, you don't know how they're going to get here, and you don't know who they are, but there's a connection that you can kind of feel. At least for our experience, that's what it was like. And Darren was like, I know that this is the one we have to go with in order to find our person. And with adoption, you're not just looking for any baby, like it's a specific baby. So we called the guy up and we were like, hey, we still want to go with you even if there's a wait list. So he's like, hey, I can't tell you how long you'll be on the wait list, but I'll add you to it. And then if anything changes, let me know. So we get on the wait list, and I feel like the wait list portion was honestly the hardest portion of the adoption process, because you kind of go into it knowing that there's going to be a ton of unknowns, but then you get on a wait list to not know when you're going to enter the unknown.
Yeah. And there's nothing you can really do at that point, right? Like,
Yeah.
besides wait.
Exactly. We can't really start background checks. We can't start the home
Yeah.
study process. So you're just kind of sitting there waiting. And we got onto the wait list in September 2022. So I feel like that time was just kind of hard, where I was like, I don't even know what to do with my life. Like, do we just sit here? And people asked questions like, so do you have any updates? And I'd just be like, nope, still on the wait list, just waiting. And they're like, so what do you do? And I'm like, just literally wait.
Yeah.
So we go, and well, I'm trying to remember if it was in November. I think it was November. So a couple months, which after we got off the wait list, we got the email and they're like, hey, wait list is over. Let's take you in and get you onboarded. And that was only 2 months. And I was like, wow, I complained a lot during those 2 months, and it was only 2 months.
Probably felt like a lifetime.
Yeah. And it's hard when you're in it too.
Exactly. So that was kind of tricky, but we got the email. We were super excited, and we just started immediately doing all the paperwork. So we did background checks, fingerprints. We had to do like this questionnaire. It was a list of like 80 questions, and that's not an exaggeration, literally 80 questions, where they're asking pretty personal information about you, where it's like, tell me about your traumas. What have you been through?
Wow.
How is your relationship? And it makes sense because they want to make sure they're placing a baby in a healthy family. So we had to do that. And then after we filled those questionnaires out, we had to meet with a caseworker who then interviewed us on all of those questions. So we had to talk about everything that we filled out all over again. So those were like 2 hours of interviews each. So about 4 hours of interviewing in one night. So that was fun.
In one night?
Yeah.
Wow.
So they interviewed us together, and then they interviewed us separately. So
were they like
we did get breaks.
Was it like an interview where they were just interviewing you, or sorry if this is personal, or was it like more of a, it seems like an interrogation almost, like were they making sure that your answers aligned with each other?
No, so I was scared that it was going to feel like that.
Okay.
And that's one thing that if anyone is thinking of adopting and they haven't hit that part yet, our caseworker did a really good job. It really just felt like she was getting to know us. And it wasn't like, you answered this, but your husband said this.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
It was more just a conversation. It was exhausting because you talk about kind of hard things, but it was good. She did a great job. She handled it very sensitively. So we did all of that. And then trying to think, we had to do quite a bit of training. And not all agencies require that. We did like different training videos, seminars online, just to learn about adoption, open versus closed adoption, adoption and having like transracial adoption, so different races within the family, and how that's kind of different from when everyone's the same race. So we did that, and by about March, we finished everything up, I think. It's so hard to remember now. But it took us quite a few months to get through all of this. And then we finally got our approvals that we were legally able to adopt in June. And they did come to our house. I forgot that part. They came to our house just to make sure everything was safe and just to meet us in person one more time. But after all of that, we got approved in June. And that was kind of a weird thing. It was just like an email that I got that said, hey, everything's approved. We're good. Go ahead and let your family know that you're ready to go. And I was like, oh, okay. So like we could just have a baby at any time now.
And it was just this casual email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You're good.
Like for a week, I didn't register what it was because I was so used to them just emailing me like, okay, here's the next step. Here's the next step.
yeah.
And we still had to create what's called an adoption profile and an adoption book too. So I was like, okay, so just the next step. And then I finally sat down and talked to Darren about it. And I was like, oh, wait, no, we're good to go. So
This is
we made
real.
yeah, like we're legal. We can do this. If someone had a baby and they wanted to pick us today, we could say yes. So,
oh my goodness.
yeah, that was exciting. And we ended up doing just a post on Instagram. So a lot of people will match with birth moms just through social media. They'll see their different profiles and posts and reach out. So we started with that, and then we worked with another company to actually create a profile that just kind of had information about us, our family, and what we like to do, and pictures and stuff. And then from that online profile, they created a little booklet for us. And then they sent those booklets to the agency. So that part took us forever because I was dragging my feet for some reason on putting all of that together. I was like, we don't need to do that part. We can just post on social media. It'll be fine. So finally in August, we finished that portion. And our agency was like, okay, cool. Now we have booklets. So when the birth moms or expectant mothers do come and talk to us, we can actually show them something because they weren't actually showing them anything about us at that point, which I didn't fully understand that part either. But I was like, okay,
You're like,
that's
oh,
you do need something, right?
yeah.
So that's August 2023, about a year ago. And at this point, it's just kind of like a waiting game. We didn't really have to do anything. And it felt kind of similar to the waitlist situation where it's like, okay, so now I just wait. I'm not like checking anything off a list, which helps the time go by really fast. And it's a little tricky because your life feels a little bit on hold, but also it's still moving forward and you're like, okay, the time is going, but I'm kind of stuck right here.
Did you feel like you had to be ready at any moment?
Yeah. Yep. So that was one hard thing too, is I was like, okay, well, the adoption could happen in 24 hours, or it could happen in a year, it could happen in 5 years, or it could just never happen at all. And that was the hard part, is I didn't want to go and buy all of this stuff and prepare for a baby that I didn't even know if and when. Like, I felt very strongly that we would, but there's always that part of you that's like, is that just me hoping and it's not real?
Yeah.
So we ended up just not getting anything for a little bit. And then we had someone reach out to us on social media, which ended up being not real, a scam. So I don't know if you guys have heard of adoption scams.
I have seen awful things about that.
Yes. And I didn't really know it was a thing. Like, I'd heard about it here and there, but I just kind of figured it wouldn't happen to us because it's one of those things where you're like, oh, that happens to other people, not to me. So someone reached out to us and they said, I've got a friend, she's wanting to place her baby. Can she talk to you? And this was over Instagram, and then they kind of found us on Facebook too and started messaging us. And from the beginning, I kind of felt a little hesitant, like, feels off.
Mm-hmm.
But when people approach you like that, you do have to take it serious because expectant mothers, they're in a pretty vulnerable space and it's a big decision. It's hard. They don't know. Sometimes they don't know what their options are. Sometimes they don't have a support system. Other times they do. It's just the circumstances, you never really know what they are. And
Yeah,
so our agency told us we need to take it serious, but just proceed with caution.
that makes
So,
sense.
yeah, so we did as much as we could just over Facebook Messenger. And we would kind of direct her and say, like, hey, if you're wanting to make an adoption plan or if you're just wanting to know your options, because sometimes people will talk to an agency and decide, you know what, no, I have resources. I didn't know I had resources and I can parent this child. So we kind of just kept directing her to our agency, like, hey, you should really talk to the agency. Whether you choose adoption or not, it's totally fine, but they'll help you get in touch with resources that you need either way. And she just would drag her feet and she'd set up calls and not show up. And
Mm.
so we were kind of, I don't know. It was a weird emotional kind, it's hard to even describe it, where you get your hopes up but then you kind of are trying to keep it in check. And she was saying she was doing a month and we were like, okay,
Oh, wow.
like we need to figure this out because if this is real, that's really soon and we don't have anything. So we did end up getting a few things. Like we got a hand-me-down crib from my brother-in-law and his wife, and then we got some gender neutral outfits, like 5 outfits, and just like your basics, formula, bottles, some diapers, not a ton. Just in case we figured if we just had like the necessities, then we could go to the store afterwards and just get
Mm-hmm.
everything. Your family could kind of come together and help us. So we're talking to this girl for about a week, and then at that point she just stopped talking, and I'm like, all right, that was weird. And I got onto this Facebook page for adoption scams, and I typed in the name of her, and her name popped up so many times. She
Oh,
had been doing this for years,
Oh my
just years,
goodness.
I
and
don't
it's
understand
weird.
what people get out of that.
It was interesting, yeah, because it's not financial, because that you can't
You're
exchange
just
funds or money or anything with adoption. It's
no.
not legal.
Well, then
So
you're just emotionally messing with someone's life.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And we didn't really get in too deep with it, but the stories that I read, it was sad on there. So that was interesting. And then the same girl got our email from our Facebook page, which I learned to take that email off of our Facebook page. But she would email us probably like every 2 weeks as a different name. But I could tell it was the same person by like the language she was
Oh,
using.
wow.
Yeah.
Like she kept
So,
trying.
What
yep.
in the
We
world?
would get emails, we would get messages on Facebook. And at that point, like I would just say, yep, you're welcome to talk to our agency. And I would kind of leave it there. But yeah, that was kind of hard. And
Yeah.
I didn't think that it would affect me as much as it did, but it did kind of hurt a little bit because it felt like someone kind of preying on my vulnerabilities and
Mhm.
getting to know me and then kind of using it against me. And I can only imagine the people that got deeper into it with her that she took even more advantage of. Just kind of breaks my heart. So
Mhm.
that's one
Yeah,
thing with
that's
adoption I wish I had
so
known.
sad.
Yeah,
That's awful. I don't understand how people can do that.
yeah, it was hard,
Sorry you dealt with that.
but
That's terrible.
thank you. Yeah, it, it was hard, but we got through it and we just got a little bit more vigilant on who we
Mhm.
talked to and how we talked about it. and how we handled people that reached out to us. And we kind of pulled back from social media a little bit after that. I was like, let's just rely more on the adoption agency and how they do outreach. So we go another couple months, and I get a call in December on, I'm trying to remember, December 6th probably. And it's Steve, the guy that worked with us at our agency, and he's like, hey, I have a birth mom, and she's looked at your book, and she wants you to adopt her baby. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Are you serious? It was the coolest call. Like, seriously, I saw his name pop on my phone, and I thought, is it this? And it was. And he's like, and by the way, she is due on December 20th. So it's December 6th at this point. She's due in
goodness.
like 2-3 weeks.
Oh,
and I was like,
I have chills.
Yeah,
oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm like, oh my goodness. So I started saying yes already. And he's like, well, do you want to talk to Darren about this? And I was like, oh, yes. Let me call him, and then I'll call you back.
You're like, right. Okay, yeah.
And it's just the craziest thing. Like, everything just kind of stopped. And yeah. So I hang up with Steve. I called Darren, and I'm like, Darren, someone picked us. Someone wants us to take care of this baby. And he was like, no way, you're lying. I'm like, no, it's real. So he starts crying on the phone. I'm crying on the phone. And I tell him the due date, and he's like, oh my gosh, I thought we would have more time. Because all of the stories that we heard, it was like people were matching with expectant moms, and they'd have like 3 months to kind of get to know her through her pregnancy. And then they'd make the adoption plan together, and she'd give birth. So they had like a few months to prepare. And then we'd heard stories of people having like the next day a baby was ready for them. So we were just thinking like, oh, that won't happen to us. We're going to be like the 3-monthers where we have some time to prepare. Not the case. So I get off the phone with Darren. I call Steve back, and I'm like, yes, we want to move forward. We feel really good about it. Just let us know what we need to do. So he's like, yeah, you shouldn't need to do anything for the next few weeks. Just kind of start getting things together and preparing. So that's a Wednesday or a Thursday. We go through the week, and we're kind of ordering things on Amazon, and I'm talking to people like, what do I need? Because I didn't have a baby shower or anything. So I had no clue what you needed for a newborn. I was like, this is kind of intimidating. But
there's
get
so
up
many
on
things you don't think about that you need.
I'm like, well, do they need blankets? Do they need binkies? Do I have to do a binky that soon?
Yeah.
I don't know. I probably should know those things, but I didn't.
No, I don't think anybody knows those things.
You don't know it until you have to.
Yeah.
Yep. My stepsister, she had a baby about 6 months before, so she still had a baby registry. So I just went through her registry, and I was like, yeah, that looks good. We'll do that. We'll do that. So I'm just casually ordering all this stuff, super excited. We wake up on Saturday morning, and we both woke up really early that morning. And throughout the process, I had kind of journaled and written down just experiences that I felt were important. And so we read through all of my journal entries that morning, and we were like, oh, this is so cool. Like, this is real. This is what we've kind of imagined and dreamed about, and it's happening. And after we do that, we get up and move on with our day. We go and help a friend start moving some of their stuff to another house. And I get a call from Steve. And I'm like, oh, shoot, something's probably wrong. So I call him, or I answer the phone, and he's like, hey, so a baby boy was born this morning at 8:30 a.m. and he's ready for you in the hospital. Come and meet him.
Goodness. Oh my gosh.
And I was like, wait, what? You said December 20th. It is not December 20th. It's December 9th right now. So 3 days later.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
Yeah. And we didn't know the gender of the baby. We just were told she was
Oh.
pregnant. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet. You'll find out when they're born. And so it was a boy. Yay.
Oh.
Oh my goodness.
So we're with our friends and I'm like, I don't even have any, like everything's ordered, but nothing is here. We don't have
Yeah.
a crib set up because we were going to set up the crib, you know, within the next couple of weeks. We were in a super big rush. We had nothing ready at all. I was not prepared. But our friends were like, no, you guys just get in the car, go. We'll set everything up, you know, leave us the
Oh.
key to your house. We'll get it all ready. So when you come home, you'll be good to go. We have a
Oh,
dog.
that's
They
so
took our dog.
sweet.
And they're
Oh.
like, just get out of here. So that was really cool. I think that's one of the coolest things with adoption is just seeing so many people come together and help. But yeah, we drive to the hospital. It was about an hour and a half away from us, so not too far. We drive and we're just talking like this is so surreal. We're calling family, we're FaceTiming people. We weren't calling any of our parents because we wanted to surprise them.
Mm.
And they hadn't known that a birth mom had picked us either.
They didn't
So
know.
no, we didn't tell anyone because we were like, well, nothing's official until it's official.
Right.
So,
That's true.
and some people will tell, but we were like, it would be fun to surprise them. And also, if this doesn't happen to work out the way we're expecting and she chooses to parent her child, then, you know, we won't get other family members' hopes up either.
Mm-hmm.
So, we didn't tell any of our parents, but we called literally every single sibling on the way to the hospital and we're like, don't tell mom and dad, but this is happening. So we get to the hospital and they take us back to our own hospital room and they're like, hey, we're going to go get baby boy. And you guys, it was like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's the craziest thing seeing him get wheeled in his little hospital bassinet. We see his head like pop through the door and then come through. And
I'm like getting emotional.
yeah, like I'm sure you guys know what it's like to meet your baby for the first time. And I'm sure it's no different. It's like you just kind of know it's your baby without anyone explaining it. You just know. And they wheel him in. He was the cutest little human in the whole entire world. I was afraid to pick him up. I was like, am I allowed to touch him? Can I hold him? And the nurse was like, yeah, take him. So she puts him in my arms, and it was the most special thing in the whole entire world. He just felt familiar to me. And I'd had so many experiences throughout the process where I was like, I know that there's like a specific baby that is meant for our family and we need to get to know him. We need to get to know his birth family. There's a specific birth family that is meant for us and we're meant for them. And everything just was confirmed the second I met him and
it just
held
felt
him.
right. It all
Yeah.
came together.
Yep, exactly. So we did that. We were able to stay overnight in the hospital with him. He was super healthy. And then the next day we were able to take him home. I tried so hard to not tell my mom, but when I was holding him, I was like, I have to FaceTime my mom right now because I wanted to show up at her house with a baby. But we ended up FaceTiming her, and she came to the hospital immediately. Darren's mom came to the hospital immediately. My stepdad and then my younger brother came. And then
You're like, I cannot keep this to myself.
Yeah,
I have to tell everyone.
Exactly. As soon as I met him, I was like, okay, there's no chance that I'm able to keep this a secret. So I was able to hold off from telling my dad. My parents are divorced. So my dad lived really close to the hospital. And I was like, okay, we're just going to show up at his house tomorrow and surprise him. So all of my siblings ended up going to his house just to hang out. And he was like, this is kind of weird that everyone's here.
What's
but
going
they're all
on?
just waiting. And then Darren and I showed up with new little grandbaby, and my dad was like, "Wait, is this your baby? This is real? Are you serious?" We're like,
Oh,
"Yeah, this is him." So
oh, that's so
yeah,
special.
that's the whole story of how it happened, and it's been the coolest thing. It's a very just like sacred experience, and it's hard for me to put words to it just how special it's been to have that all come together.
Well,
So
thank you so much for telling us that story and sharing that. Like you said, I'm sure it is so sacred and special. And thank you for letting us hear it. It
Yeah,
was like I said, I literally had chills the whole
same,
time.
same. That was an amazing story. That was chills as well as I'm moving. But thank you for sharing. I love hearing that story. It's so like it's very special and all the fun memories that you've made with your family then too afterwards is that's
mm-hmm.
amazing.
And I love that you said that you were like journaling
Yes.
throughout that
Mm-hmm.
process and like those moments that like felt significant and special, and then you're able to like, well, I feel like it when you journal it kind of like cements it more like in your mind and in your body, and then also you're able to like go back and reflect on those moments, which I'm sure you just cherish more than anything. So I love that.
Definitely. Yeah, when we first started the process, I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she knew someone who was going through the adoption process, and um, she had told my sister-in-law that she created a journal because she knew that it was going to be hard some days, and that's the only thing that kind of kept her sane on the hard days. And so I was like, that's a good idea. I should do that because I'm not really a journaler. I'm not very good at it, and I wish I was better, especially
Same.
after this experience. I'm
Same.
like, I need to do this more often. But yeah, it was one of those things where on the days that I was questioning if it was the right thing, because you have moments where you're like, yeah, for sure, this is it. Like, this is right. We're doing the right thing. And then you have those days where it's like everything feels wrong and it's scary and hard and the unknown is hard. And I'm a person who really likes to know. I like to be in control. I like to know what's happening and I like to
Mhm.
know the next step. And with adoption, there's just a lot of unknowns that you don't really get the answer to until you get the answer and you don't know when it's going to come. And I think that's just how life is in general. But being able to go back and read, like, oh, on this day, I knew for sure, and this was what I felt, and I could kind of feel it all over again
Mhm.
by going back and reflecting. And I think it'll be a cool thing to share with him one day too when he gets
Yeah.
older, and I can
Absolutely.
say, on this day, like, I knew you were there, like I knew you were with us, and
Oh.
I knew that you were going to be a little boy. That was another thing. I had just this hunch, and I'm sure being pregnant, you guys probably get similar hunches where you're like, I think it's a boy or I think it's a girl. And it was no different. I was like, I think that there's a little boy. Obviously, I don't know for sure, and if I'm wrong, how embarrassing, whatever. But if I'm right, how cool.
Yeah.
and I was and I was right. I was like, it's totally a little boy. I know it's a little boy. We had boy names only.
Oh.
We had like maybe
Oh.
two girl names that I didn't really like that much. Yeah, it was cool to see that come together, and it was cool to see how on the days that were hard that I journaled, how they kind of like fit with days later on down the road, if that makes sense. Like everything
Yeah,
was
the
kind of a domino effect, and I was like able to just see the bigger picture
mhm.
looking back and reading through everything.
Link it all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, yep,
That's
exactly.
so cool.
Now, I'm also a very like the type of person who likes to know how things are going to go and have a plan and all that. Do you
Hmm.
feel like through this process it helped you to kind of grow and learn more about yourself and just how to, I don't know, figure out things for the future?
Yes, 1,000%. So, um, I am religious, and spiritual, I would say. And I feel like this whole process taught me to kind of let go of my ideas and my plans and just really rely on God and what He needs from me. Um, yeah, it's it was crazy because I'm normally I would say I'm kind of an anxious person naturally, where I worry about things. Um, but something that I feel like God gave me through the whole process was this just peaceful, calm feeling throughout, which I don't really experience generally.
Normally.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just a cool opportunity for me to just put all of my trust, like, okay, I'm giving this to you because I can't make this happen. I don't know how to make this happen. I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared. So I'm just giving it all to you, and I'm trusting that you know what's right and you know who needs to find who, you know how to lead me. So it was an opportunity for me to just kind of go internally and go based off of my intuition and my feeling and
Give up a little bit of the
yeah,
control,
yeah,
I
Control.
guess.
yep, exactly. And it was hard, but it wasn't at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. I just think like something in the last 2 years, God just was like, hey, I'm helping you extra right now. We're going to give you all of the strength to just let it go. And it worked.
Yeah.
It was really cool. I almost feel like I've lost a little bit of it because I'm not practicing it every day like I was. But yeah.
But how sweet is that that you can go back and like tell your son now about that and share
Mm-hmm.
like how that shaped you and your then relationship with him, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, I look at it and it was just over a year from beginning to end. And I wouldn't trade that year for anything. I just feel like I needed everything to um, become the person that I needed to be his mom, and learn the things that I needed to learn to be ready for him. Because, yeah, that kid deserves so much. And I definitely needed to prepare for it. And I think God knew that too. So I definitely had a lot of help to get ready. And I still have a lot of work to do, but I do feel like that year was perfect. Even for Darren and I's relationship, I just think it brought us closer, and it was something that we were able to really cement our relationship so that we were both prepared. And I saw how Darren grew throughout the whole process as well. And um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be a really like connecting
Mhm.
experience. And like you said, you're learning to kind of like let go together. And so
Mhm.
you are just there to like support each other through that process and prepare, like you said. What were some of the things that you did to like emotionally and mentally prepare?
Ah, I thought about that last night and we were talking, and I think a lot of what helped was um, learning and researching adoption. So our agency required us to do a lot of education, which was really helpful.
Yeah, I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, and not all agencies
Totally makes
require it.
sense, like you
Hmm.
said, but
Yeah,
so
so not
smart.
all agencies require it, but ours did, and I'm really glad they did. I kind of was grumpy about it sometimes because it was a lot,
Yeah.
but it was like 12 hours, and some of it wasn't always super interesting. It was a little boring, but other stuff, it was really great. Um, so we did a lot of that, and just I think one thing that stood out to both Darren and I was learning how adoption, it's this huge celebration, and there's this metaphor that people use where it's a birthday, a funeral, and a wedding all on the same day. So understanding that there's an aspect of grief that comes with adoption,
Mm.
and having empathy and just care for the birth family because they're experiencing a loss when they're placing a baby
Yeah.
and saying goodbye. And some adoptions are open, some are closed, but even with open adoptions, there is that aspect of grief. So when we're celebrating in the hospital room, there's another family in another room that's experiencing probably one of the hardest days, if not the hardest day they'll ever
Yeah.
experience, saying goodbye. And so that was a huge thing that I think helped us prepare, was understanding the birth family side of adoption. And it's a part that not a lot of people know about or talk about.
Yeah, it's not the part that people focus on
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah,
yeah, or talk about, but I love that you took the time to really learn about that and think about things from their perspective, and just I think that's really cool that you included that part of the process in your preparation.
thank you. Yeah, it was really interesting to learn about, and I also through the process had kind of a feeling of connection to the birth mom that I just felt like I knew her, and I felt like when I meet her, I would know her somehow, that we have like a kind of invisible connection, same way that I felt with Riggs. And um, so, yeah, the birth family was a huge portion of just preparing for that. And talking to other people and their experiences, we attended
Mm,
support groups. Our agency had a support group that we would attend once a month, and we'd get to hear from birth moms who had placed, adoptees, and adoptive couples. So it was really nice to just hear their experiences and what worked for them, what didn't. Every adoption, there's similarities, but they're all so different. So it's helpful to hear what works for people.
Another question is, have you faced any misconceptions or just like unique challenges through the adoption experience?
Yeah. Um, so there's one that's a huge one. And I didn't, I'm trying to think the best way to say this. It's just a really important topic and it means a lot to me. So I want to make sure that I'm speaking to it correctly. So a lot of times with our experience, people would say, you're so selfless and
mm.
you're so, that's so good of you to do that. And there's this concept of like children being saved because of adoption. And I want to pull up a post.
Is it the post you shared
Mm-hmm.
recently? I
Yep.
loved that. So yes, please
Yes.
share.
So let me find it real quick. It's on Instagram, and I'll give the people a shout out because it's the coolest page. It's a page that's specifically they're mostly directed towards birth mothers and helping birth mothers heal and supporting them. And it just gives you a different perspective that is amazing. So I'm just going to read what they say about the whole concept of like children being saved and you're the hero as the
Mm.
adoptive parent. One of the most overgeneralized statements about adoption that I've heard as an adoptee is there are so many children who need to be saved. There are definitely some, but adoption is not saving anyone. Adoption is supporting a woman who is fit to make a very hard decision for her child's life. Adoption is supporting a child who could struggle with identity by readily welcoming open adoption and a relationship with their birth family into your life. My eyes are watering, so I'm having a hard time reading.
It's okay.
Adoption is supporting ethical practices within the systems around you. Adoption is supporting an expectant mother who changes her mind and decides to parent, even more so if you rally alongside her to help her be successful. Adoption is supporting adult adoptees as they process living a life not knowing where they came from until today. Adoption is supporting healing of birth parents walking through a lifetime of grief and loss. Adoption is supporting one another as we navigate the muddy chaos adoption can be. It's all so complex, but no one is a hero, a savior, or glorified. We are just a part of something big and sometimes hard to understand. And I just love that because I've never felt like I saved my little boy. I never felt like I was his only chance of a good life because that boy didn't need saved. That boy is loved by his birth family so much. And the choice to place him didn't come easily. And I'm just lucky to get to have him in my life and to be able to be his mom. And I just love him and he's loved by so many. And yeah, adoption is not saving, adoption is simply supporting.
I love
I
that.
love that.
Yeah.
That's another thing that you wouldn't necessarily think about,
Mm-hmm.
but once you say it, I'm like, that makes so
Total
much
sense.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that perspective.
And
And
I
I love,
forgot
What?
to say who even posted that. Yeah, Join Brave Love. They're awesome. They're so good. They share so many good things about birth moms, and I love them.
Thanks for sharing
yeah.
that. I'm like, we could talk about
I
this
know for
for
so long. I'm
like
loving hearing all of
hours.
this. Like this,
Honestly,
it's so great because it's a perspective I've never heard,
yeah,
and
it's like,
I think it's so important for everybody to hear this perspective and
yeah.
learn about adoption.
So, what advice would you give to others considering adoption or starting this process? What would you like to tell them, or anything else you would like to add to anyone listening?
I like I said in the beginning, when you first start looking into it, it can feel really overwhelming and really intimidating. I think that most people would probably get scared off. Also, there's a lot of stories that when you mention that you're considering adoption, people will start telling you all of the scary stories
Mm,
about adoption. Um, but just trust your intuition. Like, if you feel like it's right for you and you feel pulled in that direction, then there's a reason why you're feeling that way. And try to block out all of that outside noise. And if you're not proceeding due to fear of the unknown or due to fear of how much you have to do in order to make it happen, just take the time that you need to process it. It took me like a month to kind of process everything that we would have to do. And then once we started, it took me a whole year to get through that. But just be patient with yourself and don't let the fear of the unknown stop you, because it could turn into something really, really beautiful. And it's 1,000% worth all of the effort and all of the fear and all of those little moments that kind of you want to stay and retreat. It's worth it in the end. It's so worth it because you find your person that was meant to be with your family,
your
and you find
soulmate.
your birth family. Exactly. It's your soulmate. Like, you're meant to be together, and there is absolutely a specific baby meant for you. And if you're feeling pulled in that direction, I just know that God's going to make sure that it happens. And I don't know when, I don't know how. Every story is so different, every timeline is different, but he'll make sure that it happens. You just need to be doing your best to be ready for when it does happen.
That's amazing. I love it.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Mackelle, for coming on
Yeah,
and sharing your
of
story.
course.
Seriously, it was so incredible to hear about your experience. Like I said, I literally had chills the whole time.
Same.
It was really just so beautiful, and your family is so beautiful. Riggs is so beautiful, and
Thank
I
you.
I'm just so happy for you, and I am so happy that you were able to come on and share your story, and that other people are able to listen in and experience that with you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for letting me. And I don't know how many people out there are wanting to adopt, but if you have questions or you just need to talk, I'm here because it's nice to have people that know what you're going through.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And for everybody listening, we will link your Instagram if you have any questions or want to reach out. Is that okay to do?
Yep,
Perfect.
that's great.
And thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next week.